If your SNOO shows the safety clips not engaged error even when the sleep sack is installed correctly, the wiring harness is usually the problem. So on the older SNOO units, the small wires to the safety clip sensors can break at the connector. This can also happen with the speaker wire. As you can see, originally the design of these connectors was a solder point. So especially after the O-rings have been replaced, you can see this issue pop up, because over time that these connectors can fray and break. So the solution to this is to install a new connector. So in newer units, this connector was upgraded, which is what is included with this wiring kit. This is less prone to failure as it does not use any soldered joints. The SnoozyFix Wiring Repair Kit also comes with a replacement speaker and the extension harness to the motherboard for the speaker. So if you're having issues with crackling or noise issues, this will fix that as well. So in this video, I'll show you how to replace the safety clip wiring harness, speaker wiring harness, as well as the speaker step by step. So here's everything included with the SnoozyFix Wiring Repair Kit. First we have our speaker extension cable, and then we have our extension cables for the safety clip sensors, as well as new wires from the safety clip sensors that connect to the extension cable. Then for tools, we have an Allen key for disassembly, alignment rods when we put everything back together, a wedge tool, some solder-free connectors that are only needed if these wires need to be replaced. Oftentimes they do not, but it's there just in case, as well as 3 zip ties. So now let's get through to the repair. So the first step is we'll want to remove our sleep sack. And the next step we'll want to remove the mattress. The first thing you want to do is use your wedge tool and remove these clips. All you're doing is just taking your wedge tool, sticking it underneath the back here, and just prying it. This is probably a good time to also soak them in soap. So after that, the next thing you'll need to do is just take a Phillips screwdriver. This is a number 2 Phillips. And you'll want to remove these 6 screws here. So let's get those removed. You'll notice as you're removing these that there are some plastic pieces underneath. You can see that this one has been previously repaired and they were not replaced. The only thing that happens if you do happen to lose them is that it scuffs the paint a little bit. After you remove that last screw, sometimes the bracket can drop down below. So what you want to do in that case is just use your pick tool, stick it underneath the head of the screw, and it'll help you pop it out. Now onto the other side. Okay, so now that we have our screws removed, I did also remove the netting completely around here just to get better lighting so you guys have a better view, but definitely not required for this process. So now we'll just lift up on this metal cover and remove that. So now that we have this open, we'll want to remove these 3 zip ties. The easiest way to do this is to cut them by the large head. The best way is to use a pointed pair of pliers, flush cutters, or even a pair of nail clippers would work too. So if you just cut it right down the middle, it'll pull apart easily. Be careful not to hit the wires. So the next step is to disconnect these 3 connectors. They're the 2 safety clip harness wires and also the speaker harness. When you disconnect these, you want to make sure that you pull them by the connector and not by the wire, because this is what happens when you pull them by the wire. They can break. A pick tool is definitely helpful when removing these wires from these brackets, but is not mandatory. What I like to do is put the pick tool behind the wires underneath the bracket and kind of just push them out. You want to do it one wire at a time. And then when we pull them apart, want to make sure we pull by the connector and not by the wires. Okay, so now that we have the connectors removed, you'll see this green board if you have an older unit, and the newer units will not have this. And also, one thing to note is this center screw. So the older units, around early 2018 or so and earlier, have this center screw. There's nothing to remove here. You do not want to remove this. But if you have a newer unit with this center screw that has a larger head to it, you want to rotate it counterclockwise to loosen it. Also on the tray, there will be an O and an I. I like to think of I as installed and O as off. And you just want to push down and turn. As you can see, it's a gasket. So as you push down on it, you're not going to break anything. To remove the green board, all you need to do is take your wedge tool, just stick it at the bottom of the foam and pop up like that. This is not its first time being replaced, so yours may be a little bit more difficult, but it will pop up eventually. So now that we have these connectors disconnected, this board up, and if you have the newer style SNOO, you'll want to remove that screw. We're ready to lift this up. So as we lift up, we'll just want to guide these wires through so that nothing gets yanked on. And we will lift it up. So just to kind of give you an overview here, if you do have this unit apart already, now is a great time to change your O-rings as well. But if you are having this issue, it may well be that you were replacing the O-rings and finally these wires gave out from the movement of replacing them. And these are your motor O-rings right here. If you see any wear on these, or if there's a lot of dust around your motor, you definitely want to clean that up and get those O-rings replaced. You can check out my other video on the process for that. So the first step in this process, you'll need a 7mm socket set and a 4mm hex key, which is included with the kit. And there are 6 bolts around this base that we will need to remove. So the 7mm socket gets removed from the top, and then you'll need to go completely underneath the SNOO and put your Allen key in there to hold the bolt in place. So another great use for the pick set is to help you remove these small nuts and washers. Okay, so now that we have all the bolts removed, we will need to lift up on this table. So if you look underneath, if you're looking at the motor on your left side, there's the green motherboard here. So what we'll need to do is rotate this up and pivot it along this axis. So as you're lifting up, first you want to guide the wires and the green board, if you have one, through one at a time. So then on the green board, there will be some wires that are tight. You want to disconnect those from the board. And remember to pull by the connector and do not pull by the wire. So we have that first wire connected, which goes right here. That is the temperature sensor that goes to the motor. And then we will want to remove the motor wire, which is this bottom right connector. And then this 2-pin connector right next to it. So this is your power connector, the white one. The 2-pin connector is your thermostat switch. And the second connector with 3 pins is your motor harness. So those 2 connectors are removed. And now we'll want to come over here and remove the orange connector, which may be a different color for you. Then you'll need your cutters again to remove the zip tie that is holding in the ferrite on the motor harness. So now that that's removed, we will lift up on this table and remove that. So the next step is to remove our wire harnesses on the motherboard side. There's a connector here that you just need to pull back and the wires will pop through. And then on this side, we'll need to remove this zip tie if you have a mounting pad down there. So then it's similar to the other side. You just want to pull back on this and pull your wires through. So now the next step is to grab your Phillips screwdriver, and there are 2 screws on the motherboard, one in the top right corner and one in the bottom left, and we'll want to remove those. So as you can see, these wires run underneath the motherboard, and then they connect right here at these top left connectors. And then the speaker connector is this bottom one. So the way I like to do it is to actually connect the new wires to the old ones first, and that way it can fish it through underneath the board. So now we'll want to pull the new wires through, and also you can disconnect your old wires on the board, and you want to use your fingernail to hold down that connector that's attached to the board and then pull on the top part of the connector. If you don't, there is a good chance that this comes off completely. If the connector on the board does happen to disconnect and come out with your connector, all you need to do is slide it back on, but make sure that you line up the pins with the holes, because if you don't, you'll bend the pins and then it'll make it even tougher to reassemble. So now we'll want to pull that through. Got the new wire through. We can disconnect the old wire. And when you have this through, you want the black wire on the bottom and the 2 gray wires on the top. So that way when you thread this over, it sits properly in the connector without the wire being twisted. So now let's pull our next safety clip harness through. And this one actually just goes through the top of the board here, underneath, and then over and around here. We can lift up the board slightly for that. And when we're starting to fish it through, just keep your black wire down and your 2 gray wires that way. Oops. Just like that. And we'll disconnect that connector. Connect this new one, and it goes on, if you can see where your screw was, it goes on the front or the top side of it. So right now we're on the back side, so we'll just lift up on the motherboard a little bit, push it to this side, and put the board back down. And we'll connect that, wrap it around in a loop, and connect it in there. So now the last piece to replace is the speaker harness. So for this one, you want the black wire on top and the gray wire on the bottom when you're fishing it through. So we have that through. Now we'll disconnect our speaker harness. And then so now we'll loop around the speaker harness and connect it into the board. Pull the slack out of the wire. These replacement wires are thicker than the original, so they should last much longer. And also having the upgraded connector is tremendously helpful in this process. So now that we have those wires replaced, we'll just need to screw the motherboard back in. So we'll grab our screws, put them back in. Now's a great time to vacuum this out as well. Okay, so the next step is to install our wires back into this harness here. Install the safety clip sensor first, and then the larger accelerometer. So one thing to note with these wiring harnesses is that some versions of the SNOO have these ferrites around other wires. So if your original wire has this on it, it is not required with these newer, thicker wires. So before we reinstall the motor frame, now is a great time to replace these O-rings if you haven't already. On the older units, you have to replace them from the bottom. So this is the top side. On the newer units, they slide up. And on the older units, like this one, you remove these screws, this bracket comes out, and then you can pull the bearing out. If you want more detailed information on this, check out my other O-ring video. So we'll just want to slide our zip tie through the mount down here, or yours may also be over here. They've kind of varied throughout the years. So then we'll want to install our zip tie like that. So you just want to take your cutters and cut the excess of the zip tie off. Okay, so now we want to reinstall our connectors. So we'll start down here with the centering sensor, and then our temperature sensor, and our motor harness, our thermostat switch, and that's all of them. So just so you know, these connectors are directional, so there is an indent on them and also an opening on the board. So for example, on this side, there's an extrusion right in the center there, and on the board there's this opening. So you want to line up the extrusion with the opening on the board. I want to fish our new wires through the motor frame. So this can get kind of tight in here, and as you're lining everything up, you want to make sure that you line up the holes in your motor frame with these black grommets. It'll help it easier when we put our bolts in later. So then we'll want to slide our two wires through. And again, if you have a newer unit, you will not have this green board. Just want to line everything up there. Just pull the wires out a little bit. Don't yank on them. And then what I like to do is kind of just lift up on this board in case the wire's caught on anything, and make sure that everything is through. Okay, so now that we have everything through, we can go ahead and reinstall our bolts all around the edge. So when you're reinstalling the bolts from the bottom of the SNOO, there are two versions that have appeared over the years. The older style has this bolt with a washer, and then you'll install the black washer as well. And then on the newer units, it has a washer built into the head. So all you need to do is install this bolt and then also the rubber washer as well. So you'll stick that up from behind, and then here's what we'll do on top. Okay, so when we install them on top, we'll first want to put in our rubber washer. Then there's a smaller flat metal washer. And then this is in some versions where it is a split washer, a small one. If you don't have it, no big deal. Just no need to install it. And then also the nut on top. A helpful aid to install these is using your straight pick tool and line everything up. And then all you need to do is, when you're pushing the bolt up from the bottom, put your pick tool with this assembly in the hole, and then as the bolt's in there, you can drop it down and everything should line up. Okay, so now that we have them all hand tight, I'll just go around and tighten them up a little bit. Okay, so now the next step that we're going to do is we're going to take our top assembly and we are going to replace the speaker. So the first thing we're going to do is flip this over, and we will remove these two screws right here. A word of warning though, as you remove the second screw, the speaker will drop down, so you'll want to put your hand underneath there. So now we'll flip it back over, and we'll remove the speaker. So pull it through here. And now we'll flip this over, and there's two more screws we need to remove. Okay, so now that we have the speaker box removed, all we need to do is split this in half, like this. And then if you have this sticker on the front, you'll want to just peel it back. Newer units do not have this, so if you happen to tear it, you can always just leave it off. So next we'll want to remove these 4 screws on the speaker. And the best screwdriver for this is a Phillips number 0. If you have one, it'll make the job the easiest. So remove these 4 screws. Okay, so now that the 4 screws are removed, you'll want to push on your speaker and it'll just pop out. So now the next step is to take your new speaker, and you'll put it in your speaker box. It doesn't matter which way that these wires go, but the wires just happen to be curved like this already, so I'm just going to leave it like that. So now we'll go ahead and flip it over and put our 4 screws back in the case. Okay, so now that our 4 screws are reinstalled, if you do happen to have this cover, you can put it back on, or as I said, newer units do not have this, so if it's torn like this one, you can also just remove it completely. So now that we have the speaker installed, we will put the case back together. As you can see on the bottom, there's this opening, and this is where the wire sticks through. So we'll just guide that through there and close the case together. So now we'll want to put 2 screws back in here. They go where this extrusion is on both corners. And we'll be going back to our Phillips number 2 screwdriver for this. Okay, now that this is installed, what we'll do is place our speaker back in this hole, and we'll put our wire through this opening and through the holder down here. So you'll want to hold it with your hand and flip the base over. So as you're holding it up with your hand, you'll put your screw back in and tighten it up. And now the speaker is all set. So normally with the safety clip sensor issue, it is with the female ends of these connectors here. So normally these wires don't go bad, and I typically would not recommend replacing them unless you know that they have gone bad. So the way this connector works is you open it up. There's 2 tabs on the edge. If it is shut, all you need to do is pry up a little bit on it and it'll open up. And when you put these connectors in, what you'll need to do is spread them out a little bit, the wires. Put them through the translucent plastic opening, one at a time. And then as you're putting it through there, you want to line it up so that the wires are straight and right above all those gold pins. So once that's done, all you need to do is squeeze it together. So we don't want to get too close to the wall here, so that way we have room to work. So what I'm going to do is line it up with a little bit of space there and cut it just on the left side of the black centerpiece. Okay, so that's the old wire. We will not need that anymore. And now we'll want to open up this side of the connector, which it is. And then we will need to separate all of these wires on the safety clip sensor. I'm going to once again use my pick tool just to kind of stick it in the ridge of the wire to get them to separate. So one thing I did just notice as I was doing this is that the black wire was facing this way. As you can see, it's facing this way over here, and we want this facing up so it's easier to work with. So all I'm going to do to open this is use my pick tool on the edges here, kind of pop them out a little bit. That side's open. This side is also open. And then all you need to do is pull up this way and the wire comes out. So now we'll redo that. Flip this over. Put each wire in each hole. Make sure it's over the gold pins and then close it. Make sure that the latches are latched completely. So now we'll go over here, line up our pins. And if you don't have these wires separated enough, they'll kind of force themselves outwards, and that way they won't be straight over the pins. So in this case, what I need to do is just pull them apart a little bit more, so that way they stay straight inside the connector. Just like that. That is repaired. And then when we put the wire back in, it goes through this hole, and make sure you do not put it through this foam hole. Just like that. So if you have an extra zip tie or even a bread tie, that would be a good opportunity to just secure this connector underneath this bracket and just zip tie the wire in. And if you have a zip tie, try to keep the head of the zip tie down so that way it's not rubbing on anything when it's sitting. And there you have it. All you need to do is just do that on the other side if you're having an issue with that side as well. Okay, so before continuing, we'll need to make sure that we reinstall our brown brackets. They just slide into these openings down here. Then you want to take your alignment rod. If you don't have one of these, you can also use a bamboo skewer. And then you'll take the alignment rod, stick it through the brown bracket. And once it's through the brown bracket, it goes into this hole down here. So once we have those aligned, now we're ready to put in our base plate again. So before reinstalling the base plate, what I like to do is actually take my old wires and connect them into the new wires. And that way it gives me a little more working room to pull these wires through. So now we'll grab our base plate. And when pulling these wires through with these extensions on here, it makes it quite a bit easier to install everything. It still does make it a little difficult pulling this green board through if you have one, but it is still very doable. So we'll just get those started through there. And then on this side, we'll get this wire in there. And just as a reminder, make sure you have these brown brackets installed and centered. And make sure that this metal plate is in line with the motor and the speaker is on the side that does not have the motor. So now I'll take the green board and I'll just have to hold it as I stick it through. So it's a little bit easier for me in this video because I have the netting removed and I can work through the side. But if you have the netting still installed, you kind of just have to reach your arm underneath there to get it all back together. So before you push down too much, make sure that you pull the rest of the wires through so you don't crush them. So now that all the wires through, we can push down. Kind of just rotate the table to get everything aligned. So now is a good time to grab your alignment rod again, just to recheck the alignment. And once everything's aligned, when you rotate, it should lock into place. If you need the bracket to move up or down, you can always lift the SNOO up to get it to slide. And another option too is to use your pick tool to kind of move it around in there. So those are aligned. Now we can remove our old wires that we used to fish it through. So now we'll reconnect our wires, connect the speaker, safety clip sensor, this board. Just push firm on it, it should stick back in place. So now we'll want to grab our zip ties and again fold over the edge so that way it feeds through the mount easier. Just feed that through and zip tie it in. But before doing these zip ties, what we'll want to do is test it out on the app and make sure that everything's working. Because if we have to look back at anything, make sure we didn't miss any connections, we'll want to make sure that we don't have to cut those zip ties and reinstall them. So now that we've verified in the app that everything is working with the SNOO, we can zip tie these two wires in. So the best way to do this is the wire that is coming from the safety clip sensor is on top, and then you fold the two connectors underneath it and then slide them into the holder. Just like that. So now we'll install that zip tie. Oops. And for the last wire, once again, we'll take our zip tie, fold it over, stick it through the mount. And then we'll just need to trim our zip ties right above the head. And there you have it. Now we're ready to install the metal plate. So next we'll grab our metal plate, and these holes line up with the speaker. We'll just put that back on. So now I'm going to put my SNOO netting back on so that way I can show you how it's done. And next we'll want to put the mesh back in. Sometimes the mesh can be a little finicky. What I like to use first is the wedge tool and actually go on the edge of the mesh. So if you can see here, the mesh has this plastic lining. And what I typically do is I'll stick the wedge tool next to the bracket just to push the mesh below the bracket. Just next to it. Because the issue is if you go directly on top of the bracket, it might overexpand it, and it's just harder for the mesh to fit through. So the edge usually is the best. And it's making sure that you go on both sides, left and right of the bracket, to make sure that the mesh is fully seated. Okay, now that the mesh is all installed, we'll need to take our two alignment rods again and stick them through the center screw. And then rotate the table until you feel it go through the brown bracket. And then once it's through the brown bracket, keep rotating until you feel it drop into that center indentation again. So we'll stick it over here. And actually we'll want to remove this one, so that way we can, again, rotate the table until it centers. This one is centered, and this one will drop back in, and they're both centered. So then I'll take some screws, put them in, and start tightening them. Okay, so now that we have our first screw installed, we can remove the centering pins. Then we'll put our screws in there and then finish tightening these down. Make sure you don't over tighten these, otherwise that nut inside the brown bracket can actually start spinning, and the next time this needs to be taken apart, it will be very tough to get apart. Okay, now the last step of reassembly is putting the mesh clip covers on. The thinner end points towards the outside. So all you'll need to do is put it on top and just push down hard. if you're having issues installing any, make sure that your mesh is completely down and it's below the bracket. And then also you want to check and make sure that these two retaining clips are in there. If they're broken or dislodged at all, that's okay. You can remove the broken piece and then still install it, as the other one will hold it in. Sometimes it can be a little tough to install. So what I like to do in that case is use the pick tool and kind of just guide the two clips together. So as an example, what happens when these are installed is that this angled clip goes into the ridge of this cover. So typically I'll take the pick tool and I'll push in just a little bit as I'm installing this. So you'll go through here and push outwards on this piece. So I just put in the front one as an example, and then I just ever so lightly just push, and then it goes in. Okay, everything's installed. So now that your SnoozyFix is completed, you're all good to go. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to leave a comment or reach out to us. Check us out on SnoozyFix.com. Thank you.